Hi, welcome to Nina in the Kitchen, where today I'm doing a recipe that I created years ago, and over the years I've kind of been tweaking it. It's pork tenderloin with rosemary and mushrooms, and I make a pan sauce for it that is phenomenal. So I'm going to take the pork tenderloin. We'll discuss that in a minute, and in the meantime I will go over what we do with the mushrooms. So here I have 6 ounces of cremini mushrooms, which I've sliced. Cremini mushrooms are baby portobellos, and you can use white button mushrooms, you can use shiitake for this. Whatever you have that you love, just put them in a pan that's hot. You'll sear them. They'll get a nice brown on them. Now this is 6 ounces. Wait till you see how little that we end up with. It's amazing. I put about 2 tablespoons of olive oil just to coat the bottom of the pan. And this is unsalted butter. I'm just going to put a little, that's not even quite a tablespoon of unsalted butter in there. And I'm only doing that because I like the flavor of those 2 things together. Then when these start to crisp up and get nice and brown and toasty looking, I'll flip them around, and at the very end I'll finish it with salt and a little bit of rosemary and garlic. So while the mushrooms are cooking, let's get back to the tenderloin. This is a pork tenderloin. Pork tenderloins weigh in at about a pound, maybe a little over a pound. So they can feed 2 to 3 people. And you'll see when you take it out of the cryovac pack, you'll see that there's a tapered end. If you're going to leave this whole, you should flip this over and just put a little piece of butcher's twine around this tail end, I call it. And then you'll have a piece that's uniform in size, and it'll cook better for you. What we're doing today is I'm going to slice this into medallions, and the reason for that is just because I want to show you a quick way to do this for a weeknight dinner. Now this is fat, and you can tell because it's kind of gushy when you feel it. Is that a cooking term? Anyway, it's wobbly, it's easy to move, and I know that's fat. But this stuff over here, this is called silver skin. And silver skin has no nutritional value. It is, it's chewy. It will actually make the meat contract around it so that you end up with a really chewy bite that's not very good. You don't have to take this off, but I do, because it really doesn't take very long. You make a cut in it, and then once you do, what I do is I take all that meat, put it right back, and then you just sort of wiggle your knife back and forth at an angle, and it'll come right off. With this meat, you can actually take it and pull it. What's nice about tenderloin is that it's got a delicious flavor, it's packed with flavor, it's a very lean meat, and it's juicy. So it's a big bang for the buck. And let me just see what's happening over here. Oh, that smells so good. So now is when I'm going to put just a little minced garlic in there. That's about 1 clove, and a pinch of chopped rosemary. That's about 1/8 of a teaspoon of rosemary. And the reason I'm putting this in here is because those same flavors are going to go into the dish that I'm making with the pork, and so therefore we're carrying the flavors over. So now this pork tenderloin, what I'm doing, because we're doing a quick weeknight meal, these medallions. And then this last little piece, just keep it just like that. And then I turn it on its end and push it. And that's the medallion of meat that we'll be cooking for our dinner. And this guy, you see, you can kind of smush him too, and he turns into the same size. So now we've done everything pretty much real time, and these mushrooms, if you look at them now, they're nice and toasty brown. They're still juicy, they're not dehydrated. I can smell the garlic, it's very fragrant. And now is when you add salt. If you add your salt right away to mushrooms, they'll never sear like that for you. So I'm just going to take these and put them off to the side. So now we have a clean pan again. It has some of the fond from the mushrooms at the very bottom. And you want to keep that in there. Fond is a French cooking term meaning a foundation, meaning the foundation for a sauce. And when you sear meat, it's not to sear the juices in, as we were taught, but actually it's to create this fond and make your pan sauce, or whatever sauce you're making for your meal, a little more luscious. So we have these 4 pieces, 4 medallions going in, and if you'll notice right now, they don't want to move. And the reason is because they're not seared. When a meat has a nice crust on it and it's seared, it will come right off of your pan when it's ready. So we're going to season this with salt. Season each piece. I'm going to even do a little pepper. And the other things that are going in here, I'll use butter at the end. And I have some garlic. This is 1 large clove or 2 small cloves. And then I have about a teaspoon of fresh chopped rosemary. I'm going to add a little bit to that. This is rosemary. It comes in a sprig like this, and you can just pull these small pieces off. And then whatever is on the stem, you just go backwards right down the stem, and then you have the rosemary needles in your hand. And rosemary is an herb that is called a hard herb, meaning that it's not like parsley where it's a very fine leaf. These leaves are not like a pine needle, but they have some substance to them. So the rosemary is something that can cook in a dish. When this is a little more cooked, I'm going to put rosemary in the pan to give some fragrance to the dish, and also just, it has such a delicious flavor. Now let's see, I'll bet these are seared by now. And yes, sure enough, look at that. What wouldn't budge before is now, it's like a non-stick pan. You see, you just flip it. There's a nice caramelization on that. One way to tell if your meat is ready to flip is when you look at it very closely, you can see that there's some moisture. Can you see that as I press? You can see there's moisture on the top of the meat that wasn't there when you put it in the pan. And that tells you that it's ready. So I did end up searing the sides on some of these, and this is what I mean by doing that, is that when it's finished cooking on one of the flat sides, you just flip it over to sear this edge. And on a big enough piece of meat, you might want to do the tops and the sides. Now I'm putting a tablespoon of butter and the garlic and rosemary. And this is the start of the pan juices. And the garlic, you don't want it to cook too much. So, what I've started doing over the years is I have brandy. This is about 3 tablespoons of brandy. So, now 2/3 of a cup of chicken broth goes in. And you're going to scrape up all of that fond. I'm going to take this meat out and let this rest, because from now on, this is just about the pan sauce. And this can go up to a high heat, because you do want to reduce this somewhat. Now, of course, chicken stock that's homemade is the best, but if you don't have that, use your canned or boxed stock, that's fine. And just let this cook off. This will take about 3 minutes. What reducing is, what happens is it gets thicker and becomes more like a glaze, and it has a concentration of flavors. So I'm gonna taste this to see if I'm there. And now when I make stock, I never add salt to the stock because stocks, as they boil away, they reduce. If I'm using it for a reduction like this, I want a concentration of flavor, but I don't want that salt. So never salt your stock if you make it. And if you buy stock, just get the low sodium. Oh, that tastes really good. The rosemary with the chicken. Garlic in the background, that's delicious. Now, you can stop right here. You can add your mushrooms to this, add the meat back to this. This is what you can bring to the table, and it's fantastic. It's delicious. But if you want to really gild the lily, here's what you do. I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of cream. And put the mushrooms back in. So now we have a cream sauce and mushrooms, but wait, there's more. Just a little pat of butter, that's all. So that's going to just kind of thicken this up and make it lovely. This is delicious served over rice or potatoes. And now let me taste for seasoning, because the mushrooms, remember, I put seasoning in at the end, so they do have salt on them now. Oh man, that's good. Ooh, that's really good. You can see it's bubbling a little harder, so that means it's nice and creamy. When it coats the back of a spoon and holds it, we're done. Now at this point, I'm going to put these medallions back in along with the juices and just sort of toss them around in this sauce. To serve this, just take one of these lovelies out of here. Everyone should get some mushrooms and a little bit of sauce. Oh, the rosemary, the rosemary in here is fantastic. Let me just take a little taste for you. Perfectly cooked. I don't know how it happens, but every time I make this, so you just want a little bit of pink. It's not raw, but it is a little more than medium. Let me get some mushrooms, and I have to get some of that rosemary. It just smells so good. This takes just minutes. So fantastic. You have to try this. Fresh rosemary, the fresh garlic, the cream, big flavors, very simple dish. And if you don't add the cream, it's delicious and it's a low-fat meal. I hope you try this recipe. Please like and subscribe. Leading in the Kitchen on Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, and I'll see you next time, guys. Thank you. Bye.